the short-legged champion. They laughed at the short-legged horse at the auction as if it were nothing but a worthless mistake, but a humble man decided to buy it, ignoring the looks of contempt. While everyone mocked, he began a silent and determined training. What happened next silenced the entire town and proved that not every victory depends on appearance. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The sun beat down mercilessly on Horizon Stables, the most respected property in New Hope, a small town in rural Kentucky known for breeding racehorses. Mark Collins, 32, a physical therapist who had recently moved to town, walked among the stables observing the movement of the annual auction that attracted farmers and investors from throughout the region. He had no intention of buying an animal. His modest practice had barely begun to bear fruit, and his presence there was merely to better understand the local culture. "Let's move on to the next lot," announced Richard Montgomery, owner of the stables and the most influential figure in town. Tall, with an imposing bearing and deep voice, he commanded the event with the naturalness of someone born to power. A purebred Andalusian, 3 years old, impeccable lineage. Applause echoed as a beautiful black horse entered the arena. Bids multiplied rapidly, exceeding figures that Mark could never imagine spending on anything in his life. Having graduated, through much effort, the son of a seamstress who raised 3 children alone, he observed this world with the curiosity of a foreigner. That's when he noticed a strange movement at the back of the stable. Moving discreetly away from the crowd, he found 2 handlers dragging a horse different from all he had seen that day. Smaller in stature, with visibly shorter legs than normal and dull brown coat, the animal was reluctant to follow, as if it sensed its fate. "What's going to happen to him?" asked Mark. "This cripple?" replied one of the men, not hiding his disdain. "He's going to slaughter. Born like this with a problem in his legs. Richard says he stains the reputation of the stables." "To slaughter? But he seems healthy apart from his legs." "Look, Doc, a horse that's good for neither racing nor breeding has no use here. Boss's orders." Something in the animal's expression touched Mark deeply. Large, dark eyes that seemed to understand every word said about him. For a moment, he saw himself reflected in that gaze. The boy who limped after a childhood accident. The target of jokes at school, always the last chosen in physical education classes. How much for him? The words left his mouth before he could think. The handlers looked at each other, confused. "He's not for sale, Doc. There are orders to take him to." "How much?" he insisted, with a firmness that surprised even himself. Minutes later, Richard Montgomery approached with a stern face. "What's happening here? We're in the middle of an auction." "This gentleman wants to buy the runt," explained the handler. "That one's not in the catalogue," Richard cut in, sizing Mark up from head to toe. "You're the new physical therapist in town, aren't you? Look, that animal has a congenital problem. Not even good enough to pull a cart. Still, I want to buy him," affirmed Mark. A sarcastic smile appeared on Richard's face. "Do you know how much it costs to maintain a horse, Doc? Food, veterinarian, shoeing. I know I can learn." The small audience that had formed around them observed the scene with curiosity. Richard seemed to evaluate the situation, sensing an opportunity for entertainment. "You know what? I'll do you a favor. You can take this freak. Consider it a welcome gift to town." He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe you can even teach this cripple to walk properly. Isn't that your specialty?" The laughter around burned Mark's ears, but he kept his gaze fixed, extending his hand to seal the deal. "Thank you. I'll call him Hope." "What an inappropriate name," mocked Richard. "But feel free to dream, Doc. New Hope loves good entertainment." The path home was marked by curious glances and poorly disguised whispers. Mark led Hope through the cobblestone streets of New Hope, feeling the weight of attention on both of them. The small, short-legged horse walked hesitantly, as if expecting rejection with each step. "I don't give him 2 months before he gives up," commented Cecilia Montgomery, Richard's wife, to her friends at the confectionery when she saw them pass. Richard said that animal shouldn't even have been born. Teresa, Mark's mother, waited at the door of the small rented house on the outskirts of town. Her face, wrinkled by years of hard work, couldn't hide her surprise at seeing her son arriving with a horse. "Son, what is this?" she asked, adjusting her apron worn by time. "Mom, this is Hope," answered Mark, stroking the horse's neck. "I needed to save him." "Save him?" Teresa approached cautiously. "Mark, we barely have space in the yard and you just opened your practice. How are we going to care for a horse? There's that old shed in the back, I can adapt it. Please, Mom, I couldn't leave him behind." Teresa observed the animal attentively, noting its disproportionate legs and frightened look. Then she stared at her son, recognizing in him the same obstinacy that had led him to overcome physical limitations after his childhood accident. "You've always had a heart bigger than common sense," she sighed. "But where will we get money to? Feed him? I'll figure something out. I promise nothing will be lacking for us." That night, while improvising a shelter in the old shed, Mark heard knocking on the fence. It was Julie Sanders, a newly graduated veterinarian who worked at the municipal clinic. "I heard about your new friend," she said, carrying a small briefcase. "I thought you might need help." "How did you find out?" "News travels fast in New Sea. Hope," she smiled, "especially when Richard Montgomery is involved." Julie examined Hope carefully, explaining to Mark about the animal's condition. "It's a form of equine dwarfism. It's not common, but it's also no reason for disposal. He can have a full life, just not suited for competitions or heavy work." "Who said he needs to be suitable for anything?" replied Mark. "Maybe he just needs to exist." Julie looked at him curiously. "You're different, you know. Most people here see horses as an investment or work tool. Maybe I'm the strange one." "Then," he smiled, "thank you for your help. You'll need special feed and some supplements," she wrote on a piece of paper. "I can get them at cost from the co-op. I don't know if I can pay. Consider it my contribution to irritating Richard Montgomery," she winked. "That man needs to learn that not everything is solved with money and arrogance." In the following days, Mark's physical therapy practice received fewer patients than expected. Rumors about the crazy guy with the crippled horse spread quickly. Richard, the largest employer in the region, made a point of mentioning the comical incident at the auction in his business meetings. A week later, when Mark returned from a rare home visit, he found a group of teenagers surrounding his house's yard. They were throwing stones at the shed and shouting, imitating distorted neighs. "Hey, stop that!" he shouted, running toward the group that quickly dispersed. Inside the shed, Hope trembled, cornered. Mark approached slowly, speaking in a low voice to calm him. "It's all right, friend. I won't let them hurt you." While calming the animal, he saw his mother watching from the door with a worried expression. "This won't stop, son," said Teresa. "People don't understand what you're doing." "I don't fully understand it myself, Mom," confessed Mark. "I just know that when I look at him, I see something that reminds me of who I am." That night, lying in the simple bed in his room, Mark leafed through the old family photo album. He paused at the image of a 9-year-old boy with an orthopedic brace on his leg holding a swimming trophy. He smiled, remembering the teacher who insisted he could compete when everyone said otherwise. He fell asleep with an idea taking shape in his mind. The next morning, while serving coffee, he announced his decision to his mother. "I'm going to enter Hope in the traditions race." Teresa almost dropped her cup. "Son, have you lost your mind? That horse can barely walk properly." "It's not about winning, Mom," he explained with determination in his eyes. "It's about showing that he deserves to be there as much as any other." The news of Mark and Hope's entry in the traditions race spread like wildfire through New Hope. Celebrated annually during the town festival, the equestrian competition was the most prestigious event in the region, attracting competitors and visitors from all over. More than a simple race, it was a symbol of status and tradition for influential families. At the Central Cafe, meeting point of the local elite, Richard Montgomery couldn't contain his laughter when informed about the entry. "It's a bad joke," he declared, pounding on the marble table. "That animal will turn our traditional race into a circus." But the entry was accepted, informed Antenor, the municipal secretary of events. Technically, There's no impediment in the regulations regarding the physical characteristics of the animals. We can always create an impediment, suggested Cecilia, Richard's wife, adjusting her expensive jewelry. After all, the organizing committee needs to ensure the prestige of the event. At the municipal veterinary clinic, Julie faced the consequences of her approach to Mark. The supervisor, Richard's cousin, called her for a conversation. "They're saying you're helping that physical therapist with the defective horse," he commented without beating around the bush. "You know our biggest clients are horse breeders, right?" "I'm just fulfilling my duty as a veterinarian," she responded firmly. "Or should I deny care to an animal because it's not perfect?" "Don't be naive, Julie. You're at the beginning of your career. Don't burn important bridges because of an idealist who just arrived in town." Meanwhile, at the small physical therapy practice, Mark was attending to Mrs. Carmen, one of the few patients who hadn't cancelled their appointments after the auction episode. "People have short memories, my son," consoled the lady, while receiving a massage on her arthritic shoulders. "Soon they'll find something else to gossip about." "It's not the gossip that bothers me, Mrs. Carmen. It's the gratuitous cruelty." "You messed with their pride," she explained. "In small towns, people cling to certain ideas, certain orders. When someone challenges that..." Upon returning home that afternoon, Mark found his mother talking with an older man at the gate. He recognized him immediately. Sebastian, a former handler at Horizon Stables, now retired. "Mr. Sebastian wanted to meet Hope," explained Teresa with a complicit smile. The old handler observed the small horse with experienced eyes, walking around the animal unhurriedly. "I worked with horses for 50 years, he finally spoke. "Seen everything in this life. This one has a strong heart, you can see it in his eyes." "You really think so?" asked Mark, surprised by the comment. "It's not what I think, it's what I know," affirmed the old man. "But if you're going to compete, you need proper training. It's not just about putting him on the track and expecting a miracle." "I don't know anyone who can train us, "You do now," smiled Sebastian, extending his calloused hand. "If you'll accept me as a partner in this madness." That night, during dinner, Teresa observed her son with a mixture of pride and concern. "Why is this race so important to you, son?" Mark remained silent for a few moments, stirring his food without really eating. "Remember when I broke my leg at 9? The doctor said I would have a permanent disability, that I would never run like other children again." "I remember," answered Teresa with tears welling in her eyes. "I wish I could have prevented all that suffering." "But it was that suffering that made me who I am today, Mom. All the jokes, all the pitying looks, and they made me stronger. They led me to physical therapy as a profession." He paused. "When I saw Hope being discarded, I couldn't stand by. It's as if I could finally do for someone what others did for me." Teresa extended her hand across the table, squeezing her son's. "Your father would be very proud of you." The next day, upon arriving at the small shed to begin training, Mark found a surprise. Julie was there, animatedly conversing with Sebastian. "We were discussing physical conditioning strategies for Hope," she explained. "Mr. Sebastian knows impressive, traditional techniques." "You shouldn't be here," warned Mark. "You could have problems at work." "I already am," she smiled defiantly, "but I decided that some things are more important than the Montgomery's approval. I don't want to cause problems for you." "Too late," interrupted Julie, moving closer. "Now we're a team, and we're going to show this town that it's not always the strongest who crosses the finish line first." The training began modestly in a small clearing behind Mark's house. Sebastian, with the wisdom of decades handling horses, established a gradual routine for Hope. It wasn't about transforming him into a fast runner, but developing his endurance and confidence. "It's not about speed," explained the old handler, while adjusting a saddle adapted to the animal's unusual proportions. "It's about persistence. This horse will never outpace the others in a sprint, but he can maintain a constant rhythm for a long time." Julie contributed with her veterinary knowledge, adapting the diet and monitoring the animal's health. Mark applied physical therapy, techniques, developing specific exercises to strengthen the muscles in the horse's short legs. "It's fascinating," commented Julie one afternoon, observing Mark working with the animal. "You adapt the principles of human physical therapy for him." "The fundamentals are the same," smiled Mark. "Identify limitations, strengthen compensatory muscles, develop new movement patterns." The small team created a training diary, recording each small progress. At first, Hope could barely complete one lap around the improvised circuit. After 2 weeks, he was maintaining a constant trot for 15 minutes without showing excessive fatigue. One morning while training, a luxury car parked near the fence. Richard Montgomery got out, accompanied by Carl Vernon, a renowned veterinarian and judge of the Equestrian Federation. "So it's true," commented Richard loudly, purposefully. "You're actually preparing this freak for the race." Mark felt his blood boil, but Sebastian placed a hand on his shoulder, silently, asking for calm. "Dr. Vernon came at my request for an official evaluation," continued Richard. "After all, we need to ensure there's no animal mistreatment in our town." The veterinarian approached with a grave expression, observing Hope with a critical eye. "As the responsible veterinarian, you should know better, Dr. Julie," he said. "Subjecting an animal with clear physical deficiency to competition training could constitute cruelty." "With all due respect, Dr. Vernon," responded Julie, maintaining professional composure. "Our training program was developed specifically for his physical conditions, with constant monitoring. There's no sign of suffering or stress." "That's for the Federation to evaluate," intervened Richard. "Dr. Vernon is the president of the Animal Welfare Committee." The veterinarian requested permission to examine Hope. For 20 minutes he conducted a thorough evaluation while Richard watched with a smile of anticipation. To his evident frustration, the verdict wasn't what he expected. "The animal is in excellent health condition," concluded Dr. Vernon. "I see no signs of stress or suffering. In fact, I rarely find horses so well cared for in professional stables." Richard didn't hide his displeasure. "But clearly, it's not in condition to compete. Look at those legs." "The regulations don't specify physical standards for participation, only health conditions," replied the veterinarian. "If the animal is healthy and the training is appropriate, there's no legal basis to prevent participation." After the departure of the unwanted visitors, the small group celebrated the moral victory. But Sebastian remained thoughtful. "This isn't over," warned the old handler. "Richard Montgomery doesn't accept being contradicted. Be prepared." Sebastian's prediction didn't take long to materialize. The following week, Mark received an eviction notice from the small practice he rented in the town center. The owner, embarrassed, explained that he had received an irrefusable offer for the commercial space. At home, the situation also became complicated. The elderly former owner, who lived in another town, called to inform that she needed to urgently sell the property due to health problems. She offered Mark the right of first refusal at an astronomical value, clearly above market price. "It's him, isn't it?" asked Teresa when her son explained the situation. "He's trying to drive us out of town." That night, mother and son sat at the kitchen table for a difficult conversation about the future. Patients were decreasing, bills were increasing, and now they would need to find a new place to live and work. "Maybe it's time to reconsider, son," suggested Teresa with contained tears. "We can't fight against someone with so much power." "That's exactly why we need to continue," responded Mark, holding his mother's hands. "If we give up now, he wins, not just against us, but against everything that represents challenging what's normal, what's expected." A noise in the yard interrupted the conversation. Upon investigating, they found Hope agitated in the small shed. The door had been vandalized, and on the outer wall a message painted in red, "Monsters don't belong in our town." The impact of those cruel words made Teresa break down in tears. Mark hugged his mother, feeling a mix of anger and determination grow inside him. While calming Hope, he noticed something different in the animal's behavior. Instead of retreating frightened as before, the horse stood firm with an attentive look, as if it too was tired of hiding. Dawn broke with a fine rain over New Hope. Mark watched the drops sliding down the window. while the radio announced that only 3 weeks remained until the traditional race. The situation was becoming more difficult each day. The practice would close in a week, and he still hadn't found another place to rent. All doors seemed to mysteriously close when he mentioned his name. Teresa entered the kitchen carrying a cardboard box with old photos. "I found something that might interest you," she said, extending a photograph yellowed by time. In it, a young man smiled next to a prize-winning horse. "It was your father, the only time he participated in the traditions race." Mark examined the photo with surprise. "You never told me Dad was a horseman." "For a short time," explained Teresa, sitting at the table. "Richard was a handler at Montgomery Stables before he knew Richard. It was his father, old August Montgomery, who gave your father an opportunity, a farmer's son without education." "Dad worked for the Montgomery family?" Mark couldn't hide his astonishment. "For 5 years. He was respected for his talent with difficult horses. August allowed him to participate in the race riding Lightning, a horse that no one could tame. Your father came in second place." She smiled nostalgically. "That's when we met. I was selling flowers at the town festival." "What happened after that?" Teresa's expression darkened. "When August passed away, Richard took over the business. He fired your father without justification, a month before you were born. He said employees shouldn't compete with bosses. Richard never got another job. With horses in this region, he had to work in construction in another town." The doorbell interrupted the conversation. It was Julie, visibly agitated. "I was fired," she announced without beating around the bush, "accused of professional negligence for dedicating time to a personal project instead of focusing on the clinic's patients." "I'm sorry," lamented Mark. "All this because of me." "No, by my choice," she corrected firmly. "But I have news. I talked to my uncle in Clear Creek. He has a small property on the outskirts with a simple house and a shed. It's unoccupied, and we can use it temporarily." "I can't accept—" "I'm not offering charity, Mark," interrupted Julie. "I'm proposing a partnership. I've always wanted to open my own veterinary clinic. We can share the space, your physical therapy on one side, my clinic on the other." Sebastian arrived at that moment, bringing with him a surprise: Carl Vernon, the official veterinarian of the Equestrian Federation. "Dr. Vernon wanted to know more about our project," explained the old handler. The veterinarian seemed uncomfortable, but determined. "What I saw the other day intrigued me," he admitted. "In 40 years of practice, I've never witnessed a case like Hope's. Theoretically, he shouldn't be able to maintain a constant trot with that physical conformation." "But he can," affirmed Mark. "Exactly, and that defies everything in the books." The veterinarian hesitated before continuing. "Richard Montgomery visited my office yesterday. He offered a generous contribution to the Federation if I found some irregularity that would prevent your participation." A tense silence dominated the environment. "And what did you answer?" asked Julie. "That my professional integrity is not for sale," replied Carl with dignity. "That's why I'm here. I want to document this case for a scientific study and offer my guidance for the training." That same afternoon, the small group transferred to the property on the outskirts of Clear Creek. It was a simple place, but with enough space for everyone. Training intensified with Carl's professional guidance. Hope surprised every day, developing his own racing style that compensated for his short legs with a cadenced and persistent rhythm. Meanwhile, in New Hope, Richard convened an extraordinary meeting of the Race Organizing Committee. "We need to establish minimum standards for participating horses," he argued. "We cannot allow animals with physical deficiencies to put the tradition of the event at risk." "But the registrations have already been confirmed," pondered the municipal secretary. "Changing the rules now would be irregular." Irregularity. "Is allowing a centuries-old spectacle to turn into a circus," bellowed Richard. Among those present was Mrs. Carman, Mark's former patient and a respected member of the community. "If I may," intervened the lady with a calm but firm voice, "perhaps we're missing an opportunity. Instead of seeing this case as a threat, we could highlight it as an example of overcoming. Imagine the interest it would spark. a different horse challenging its limits. Excellent marketing perspective, agreed the tourism secretary. We could even create a special award for inspiring stories. Richard could barely contain his indignation. So now we're going to reward mediocrity, celebrate failure? We're going to celebrate diversity and persistence, corrected Mrs. Carman. Or do you think there's only one type of victory, Mr. Montgomery? That night, alone in his luxurious office, Richard contemplated his father's picture on the wall. August Montgomery, creator of the largest racing horse lineage in the state. The man who built an empire from nothing, but who always said that a true winner doesn't fear competition, even at a disadvantage. For a fleeting moment, Richard questioned his own actions. But soon he brushed aside the doubt. He couldn't allow a newly arrived physical therapist and a defective horse to threaten everything he had built. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Albert, I have a special job for you," he said in a low voice. "I want you to discover everything about Mark Collins and his mother's past. Everyone has secrets. Find theirs." The property on the outskirts of Clear Creek transformed into an improvised training center. At dawn, the team was already in position. Sebastian guiding the conditioning exercises, Carl Vernon monitoring vital signs, Julie taking care of the specific diet, and Mark applying physical therapy techniques to maximize the efficiency of Hope's movements. "His progress is surprising," commented Carl, noting data on his clipboard. "The compensatory musculature is so developed that it practically neutralizes the limitation of the short legs." The old barn was adapted to create obstacles similar to those of the official course. Logs, water puddles, inclines and declines, each element carefully positioned to simulate the real conditions of the race. Teresa observed everything from afar, alternating between pride for her son and concern for the uncertain future. On a particularly hot afternoon, while resting in the shade of a tree, Julie found courage to ask the question that had intrigued her for weeks. "Why do you limp, Mark?" "I never wanted to ask before, but..." He smiled without embarrassment. "Accident at 9 years old. I fell from a tree and fractured my femur in 3 places. Doctors said I would never walk normally again." "But you walk." "Because someone believed I could," he answered. "My physical therapist, Dr. Paul, ignored all the pessimistic prognoses and treated me like someone who could overcome limits, not like a child condemned to be different forever." "And that's why you became a physical therapist," she concluded. "That's why I became who I am," corrected Mark. "Physical therapy was just the path I found to give back." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unknown car. A middle-aged man wearing an impeccable suit approached. "Mr. Collins, I'm Albert Grayson, private investigator. We need to talk." Teresa, who was watering plants nearby, turned pale upon hearing the name. "Who sent you?" asked Mark, placing himself between the stranger and his mother. "That doesn't matter," replied the investigator. "What matters is what I discovered about your father, Richard Collins." A tense silence dominated the environment. Sebastian approached, visibly uncomfortable. "Richard Collins wasn't just fired by Richard Montgomery," continued Albert. "He was accused of theft, supposedly subtracted valuable documents from the stables, genealogical records of a special lineage of horses." "That's a lie," protested Teresa, trembling. "Richard never stole anything in his life." "The case never went." "To the police, Puda," proceeded the investigator. "Richard preferred to resolve it discreetly, in exchange for silence and Richard Collins' definitive removal from town." Mark held his mother, who seemed about to collapse. "Why are you telling us this now?" Albert hesitated, looking around as if fearing being observed. "I was hired to investigate you, to find something that could be used against your participation in the race. But what I discovered was different than expected." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I found this in the old stables archives, a letter your father wrote to August Montgomery shortly before his death, but which was never delivered." Teresa took the envelope with trembling hands. Mark recognized his father's handwriting, who had passed away more than 15 years ago. "Why are you helping us?" he asked, suspicious. I worked for the Montgomery family for 20 years, explained. Albert, I saw your father being wronged. I saw Richard transform old August's legacy into something unrecognizable. Maybe it's time to settle some accounts with my own conscience. After the investigator's departure, Teresa gathered courage to open the letter. She read in silence, tears running down her wrinkled face. When she finished, she extended the paper to her son. Dear Mr. August, I write not to ask forgiveness or reparation, but to clarify the truth before it's too late. I never stole the documents for which I was accused. In fact, it was your son Richard who destroyed them, after discovering that you planned to appoint me manager of the stables and give me a share in the business. What Richard fears is not material loss, but the revelation that Lightning, the great champion that established the stable's reputation, was not born from your award-winning lineage. He was the son of a mixed-breed horse without pedigree, which you rescued from a slaughterhouse by pure intuition. The defect that everyone said he had, that irregular white spot on his chest, became the trademark of Horizon Stables champions. I don't seek revenge. I just can't depart carrying an unjust accusation. You always taught me that the value of a man like that of a horse is not in his lineage but in his heart. With respect and gratitude, Richard Collins. A profound silence followed the reading. It was Sebastian who finally spoke. I knew it, said the old handler with a choked voice. I always knew Richard was innocent. I worked at the stables since old August times. I saw when he brought Lightning, a skinny colt that nobody wanted. Why did you never say anything? Asked Mark, perplexed. Who would believe the word of a simple handler against the powerful Richard Montgomery? Replied the old man with bitterness. Without proof, it would be just my word against his. Now we have the letter, said Julie. We can clear your father's name. Mark looked at Hope, who was peacefully grazing a few meters away. It's not just about clearing my father's name, he said with renewed determination. It's about correcting a greater injustice, about challenging the idea that value is measured by appearance or lineage. What do you intend to do? Asked Carl Vernon. First, we're going to win this race, replied Mark, with a confident smile. Then we're going to change the rules of the game. The day of the traditional traditions race dawned with clear skies and mild temperature, as if nature itself wanted to create the perfect setting for the most anticipated event of the year. New Hope overflowed with visitors, families returning for the annual reunion, tourists attracted by the fame of the competition, and, that year in particular, curious people who had heard about the short-legged horse that would challenge the champions. In the main field, transformed into an equestrian arena, colorful grandstands housed hundreds of spectators. Flags fluttered in the gentle wind, typical food stalls exhaled inviting aromas, and children ran wielding small flags with the colors of their favorite competitors. In the temporary stables, the atmosphere oscillated between concentration and tension. Pedigree horses received the final care from experienced handlers. State-of-the-art equipment was checked, exclusive brand riding coats adjusted, race strategies discussed in low voices. At the opposite end of the preparation area, separated from the other competitors, Mark's small group worked in silence. Hope, with a now shiny coat thanks to constant care, remained calm, as if not perceiving the exceptionality of the moment. Sebastian checked the adapted harness, while Julie applied a light massage to the animal's muscles. How are you feeling? Asked Teresa, helping her son dress in the simple blue coat made by herself in the previous nights. Strangely calm, replied Mark, smiling, as if everything makes sense now. Dr. Carl Vernon approached, accompanied by 2 members of the organizing committee. All documents have been verified and approved, he informed. You are officially confirmed for the race. Even with all the contrary pressure? Questioned Julie, surprised. Let's say the committee received convincing information about the importance of keeping the competition open to all regularly registered participants, replied the veterinarian with a discreet smile. Certain letters carry more weight than certain influences. Not far from there, Richard Montgomery supervised the final preparations of his current horse, Emperor, the absolute favorite for victory. Son of the same lineage as Lightning, the imposing animal with Glossy black coat had already won 3 consecutive titles. "Mr. Montgomery," called a nervous assistant. "They're here, with a different horse." Richard observed from afar the movement in Mark's improvised stable. His face hardened as he recognized Sebastian, his former employee, now working for the opponent. The presence of Carl Vernon, a respected figure in equestrian circles, also didn't go unnoticed. "Stay focused, Henry," he ordered the young hired jockey. "No matter what circus is happening, our strategy doesn't change. Strong start, dominance in the middle, final sprint. Don't look back at any moment." The announcer announced the approach of the start of the race. Competitors were called to the presentation track, where they would parade before the start. One by one, the 15 registered horses entered under enthusiastic applause. When Hope's turn came, a murmur ran through the grandstands, followed by scattered laughter. The small, short-legged horse walked at his particular pace, cadenced and constant. Mark, mounted without the imposing posture of professional jockeys, greeted the public with simplicity. To the surprise of many, a group of children in the front row stood up, displaying colorful posters. "Go Hope!" and "Size doesn't matter." Mrs. Carmen had done her job. In the previous weeks, she had visited the municipal school to tell Hope's story, transforming him into a symbol of overcoming for the children. In the honor stand, the mayor leaned to listen to Richard's agitated explanations. "I understand your concern with tradition, Richard," replied the experienced politician, "but see how involved the public is. This kind of human story is exactly what we need to revitalize the event." The horses lined up for the start. The traditional course comprised 5 kilometers through varied terrain, an initial stretch of flat track, followed by an area of natural obstacles, a passage through the stream, a steep climb, and return to the main field for the final stretch. The starting gun echoed through the valley. As expected, Emperor and other elite horses shot forward, opening a significant distance in the first few minutes. Hope maintained his own rhythm, initially occupying the last position. Following the strategy defined by Sebastian, Mark didn't push the animal, allowing it to find its natural balance. In the obstacle section, 2 competitors were eliminated after falls in poorly calculated jumps. Emperor maintained a comfortable lead, but other horses began to show signs of fatigue from the initial sprint. Hope, with his constant and economical gallop, overtook his first opponent. At the stream crossing, a traditionally problematic point, Mark guided Hope with precision between the slippery stones. His experience with rough terrain during training proved valuable. 2 more horses were overtaken. The steep climb marked the turning point of the race. Horses that had spent too much energy in the first half faced difficulties in the elevation. Hope, with his strengthened posterior muscles, maintained the same cadenced rhythm, gradually gaining positions. Upon returning to the main field for the final stretch, the scene surprised everyone. Emperor still led, but with reduced advantage. Hope impressively occupied the 5th position. "It's not possible," exclaimed Richard, incredulous. "That cripple should have given up at the first climb." The crowd, which initially was divided between supporters of traditional favorites and the curious about the different horse, began to unify in cheering for Hope's improbable recovery. The animal's name echoed from the grandstands, propelling him in the final stretch. That's when the unexpected happened. Less than 400 meters from the finish line, Emperor stumbled. He didn't completely fall, but lost rhythm and stability. Jockey Henry, strictly following instructions not to look back, didn't notice the approach of another competitor, who quickly overtook him. Hope maintained his steady advance, now in 3rd place. The difference to 2nd place diminished with each meter. In the grandstand, people stood up excited by the unthinkable, the short-legged horse approaching the leaders. The final stretch of the race transformed into a moment of collective suspension. The crowd, now completely involved in Hope's improbable journey, watched with growing expectation as the small, short-legged horse overtook the 2nd-place competitor, with only 200 meters left to the finish line. In the transmission booth, the announcer could barely contain his emotion. "It's unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. The underdog is in second place and reducing the distance to the leader with each step. Who could have imagined this scenario when we saw that horse of atypical conformation at the starting line? In the grandstands, even the supporters of other competitors surrendered to the spectacle of overcoming they were witnessing. Children jumped, waving improvised flags with Hope's name. Teresa, supported by Julie, cried without reservation. Richard Montgomery, in the honor stand, watched the ice scene with a petrified expression. His horse Emperor, recovered from the stumble, was fighting to regain positions, but remained in fourth place. The possibility of seeing his reign interrupted by an animal he considered unworthy of competition seemed like an impossible nightmare. The track, Mark remained in perfect sync with Hope. He didn't need to push the animal, he just needed to follow that peculiar and constant rhythm they had developed during months of training. The two moved as a single entity, each limitation transformed into complementary strength. 100 meters to the end. The leader, ridden by a professional jockey hired by a breeder from Louisville, began to show signs of fatigue. The difference, previously comfortable, reduced dramatically. Hope continued advancing, oblivious to the mathematical improbability of his position. 50 meters. The distance between the first and second place competitors had become minimal. The leading jockey, feeling the unexpected approach, committed the classic mistake. He looked back, momentarily losing focus and synchrony with his animal. It was enough. In the grandstands, the crowd rose in a single movement, like a human wave, propelled by emotion. Voices united in a deafening chorus when Hope, with his short legs and improbable gallop, overtook the leader exactly over the finish line. The silence that followed lasted just an instant, the time necessary for everyone to process what they had just witnessed. Then, the explosion, applause, shouts, hugs between strangers united by shared incredulity. In the center of the track, Mark dismounted slowly, still assimilating the reality of the moment. He caressed the sweaty neck of Hope, who breathed rapidly but maintained the serene look of one who fulfilled exactly what was proposed. The improvised team ran to meet them, Sebastian with tears on his wrinkled face, Carl Vernon shaking his head in scientific admiration, Julie overflowing with joy. Teresa approached with uncertain steps, carrying a small wooden box. "Your father would like you to have this now," she said, handing her son the object. Inside the box, a faded blue ribbon, the same that Richard Collins had received when he won second place riding Lightning decades before. "How is this possible?" asked Mark, moved. "The second place ribbon." "First place," corrected Teresa, smiling through tears. "Your father came in first. But in those days, handlers' sons couldn't beat farm owners' sons. The official result was altered." The award ceremony gathered authorities and public in the center of the arena. The mayor, an experienced politician who recognized a historic moment when he saw one, gave an emotional speech about overcoming and new traditions. While placing the gold medal around Hope's neck, he announced, "From today, the traditions race will have a new prize, the Hope Trophy, dedicated to the competitor who demonstrates exceptional sportsmanship and overcoming of challenges." Richard Montgomery observed the scene from a distance, consumed by contradictory feelings. The empire built on the illusion of a perfect lineage was exposed in its contradictions. Even so, something inside him, perhaps a distant echo of his father's teachings, recognized the beauty of the moment. Carl Vernon discreetly approached the breeder. "You knew about Lightning?" asked Richard, without turning his gaze from the ceremony. "Your father told me years ago," confirmed the veterinarian. "He said his greatest pride wasn't the lineage of the animals, but having recognized value where no one else saw." Richard remained silent for long moments before responding. "Perhaps I've forgotten the most important lesson he tried to teach me." In the following weeks, New Hope transformed. What had begun as curiosity about the different horse evolved into a collective reflection about values and prejudices. The small property on the outskirts of Clear Creek, where the team had trained, became the destination of constant visits, schools taking children to meet Hope, families with children who faced physical difficulties, admirers of the story of overcoming. Mark and Julie formalized their professional partnership, creating an integrated rehabilitation center that served both humans and animals. Sebastian, with his practical wisdom, became a respected instructor, teaching young handlers to recognize the unique potential of each animal, regardless of appearances or standards. On a sunny afternoon, 2 months after the historic race, an unexpected visit arrived at the property. Richard Montgomery, without the usual entourage of assistants, walked hesitantly along the dirt path. Mark received him with polite surprise. "Welcome, Mr. Montgomery. How can I help you?" "I came to see your center," replied Richard with unprecedented humility, "and to bring a proposal." On the porch of the Simple House, with a view of the field where Hope peacefully grazed, the former adversaries talked for hours. Richard explained his plan: transform an area of Horizon Stables into a research and training center for animals with atypical conformations. He offered partnership to Mark and his team, with total freedom to develop their methods. "Why this change?" asked Mark, still suspicious. Richard contemplated the horizon for a few moments before answering. "Because I finally understood what my father tried to teach me. True value isn't in perfection, but in the capacity to overcome limitations." He paused significantly. "Besides, I owe an apology to your father's memory." At dusk, when Richard had already departed, Mark found Teresa sitting near the stable, observing Hope with a contemplative look. "What do you think of his proposal, Mom?" "I think your father would be proud," she answered, "not for the partnership with the Montgomerys, but for you having remained faithful to your principles until the world around began to change." A week later, the small team visited Horizon Stables to see the area destined for the new project. To everyone's surprise, they found not only the promised facilities, but also a plaque already installed at the entrance. Richard Collins Equestrian Training Center, where difference is valued and every step counts. And thus, in the small town of New Hope, a new tradition was born, not based on perfect lineages or ideal appearances, but in the recognition that true value frequently hides where least expected, in forms that challenge conventions and prejudices, as in the case of an improbable short-legged horse whose big heart and